It started with a phone call that chilled Evelyn Carter to the bone. She was sitting in her favorite armchair, the one with the faded floral pattern and the slight sag on the left side from years of use, sipping chamomile tea, watching the late afternoon sun paint golden streaks across her quiet living room. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a gift from her late husband, Daniel, 32 years ago. She'd just finished watering her geraniums on the windowsill when the phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway. Hello? Mom? It was her son, Jason. But his voice wasn't warm or familiar. It was sharp, clipped, like he was reading from a script. We need to talk, all of us. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the teacup. Is everything all right? No, he said, and there was no concern in his tone, only impatience. Not really. We've been talking, and we think it's time you gave us our inheritance. The words hit her like a physical blow. She blinked, certain she'd misheard. Your what? Our inheritance, he repeated, as if explaining something obvious to a child. You're 73. You live alone. You're not using the money. And let's be honest, you're not getting any younger. Why wait until you're gone? Just give it to us now. Evelyn sat very still. Outside, a sparrow landed on the bird feeder she'd hung last spring. She remembered how Jason used to love feeding birds with her when he was 6. He'd laugh every time a blue jay scared the sparrows away. Now his voice was colder than winter pavement. We've got expenses, he continued, as if she owed him an explanation. Mortgage, cars, private school for the kids. You always said you wanted us to have a better life. Well, this is it. Give us what's coming to us. Before she could respond, her daughter Chloe came on the line. Mom, don't make this weird. It's not like you're going to spend it all. You barely leave the house. We're just being practical. Then Marcus, her youngest, chimed in, his voice smooth, almost charming, but laced with entitlement. Think of it as an early retirement gift, for us. You raised us right. Now let us enjoy the fruits of your labor while you're still around to see it. Evelyn didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat had closed like a fist. They talked over each other then, negotiating percentages, debating whether the lake house should go to Jason or Chloe, arguing about who deserved more based on who visited more often, once every Christmas if she was lucky. They never asked how she was, never asked if she needed help with the roof that leaked when it rained hard, never noticed the tremor in her hands when she cooked dinner alone. And then, just Elias Salam, suddenly, they'd appeared. They were done. All right, Mom, Jason said, finality in his tone. We'll send you the paperwork, sign it, and we'll handle the rest. Don't overthink it. The call ended. Silence rushed back into the room like floodwater. Evelyn set the teacup down. It clinked against the saucer, too loud in the stillness. She looked around at the walls lined with photographs. Her wedding day, her children's graduations, family vacations where everyone smiled for the camera but barely spoke off it. She'd given them everything, every penny, every sleepless night, every dream deferred so theirs could soar. And now they wanted her to hand over the last piece of her future, as if it were theirs by default. But she stared at the photo of Daniel, his kind eyes, his steady smile. Something shifted inside her. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. She picked up the phone again, not to call them back, not to plead or explain. She dialed a different number, one she hadn't used in years. Marjorie? She said when the voice answered. It's Evelyn. I need your help. I'm ready to rewrite my will. And then, softly, with a calm that surprised even herself, no, not just rewrite it. I'm going to teach them what an inheritance really costs. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, the winter Daniel died. Evelyn remembered it like a scar on her memory, the way the sky wept, alayhi salam, they lowered his casket into the frozen ground, how the wind bit through her black coat like it was punishing her for surviving. She was 38. Jason was 12. Chloe, 10. Marcus, just 8. Too young to understand that daddy's gone meant forever. But Evelyn understood. And she knew, standing there with her children clinging to her legs like shipwreck survivors, that from this moment on, she would be both mother and father, provider and protector, dreamer and doer, alone. She sold Daniel's old pickup truck the next week, then his fishing gear, his tools, even the vintage watch his grandfather had given him. Every dollar went into groceries, heating oil, and the overdue electric bill. She took a second job cleaning offices at night after her shifts at St. Mary's Hospital ended at 3 p.m. 12-hour days became her new normal. She'd come home at dawn, feet swollen, uniform stained with antiseptic and coffee, and still make pancakes before school. Jason hated oatmeal, so she'd sneak an egg into his portion when he wasn't looking, just enough protein to keep him strong. Chloe needed new shoes every few months because her feet grew fast. Evelyn bought them secondhand and dyed them black so they looked new. Marcus had asthma. Inhalers were expensive. She learned to stretch each one by counting the puffs, rationing them like gold dust. She never complained. Not once. When Jason got accepted to State University, she didn't tell him the acceptance letter arrived the same day the bank called about the mortgage. She smiled so wide her cheeks hurt, hugged him until he squirmed, and that night she sat at the kitchen table with a calculator, student loan brochures, and a stack of envelopes addressed to relatives who never wrote back. She maxed out her first credit card that week, then the second. Chloe wanted to study fashion in New York. "It's expensive, Mom," she'd said, eyes downcast. Evelyn sold her wedding ring, the simple gold band Daniel had slipped onto her finger under a summer sky in '79. She told Chloe it was just metal, but she kept the receipt in her jewelry box for 20 years, folded neatly beside a dry rose from their honeymoon. Marcus dropped out of community college after one semester. "Not for me," she shrugged. Evelyn didn't scold him. Instead, she drove him to the auto shop where he now works, waited in the parking lot while he filled out the application, and bought him a new set of work boots with money she'd saved for her own dentist appointment. Birthdays? She baked cakes from scratch, decorated them with shaky hands after midnight shifts. Christmases? She wrapped gifts purchased with coupons and store credit, always making sure each child got something they'd mentioned in passing months earlier, proof she listened, even when they barely spoke to her. And through it all, the hospital bills, the broken furnace, the time her car broke down on the interstate in February, she never asked for help. Not from her siblings, not from friends, certainly not from her children. She believed love was shown in sacrifice, not speeches. Years passed. The kids moved out, got jobs, bought houses, posted photos on social media of vacations Evelyn couldn't afford to imagine. They called less, visited even less. Birthdays became quick texts. Mother's Day, a generic e-card if she was lucky. But Evelyn never stopped loving them. She kept their baby teeth in a velvet pouch, saved every report card, framed the lopsided clay mug Jason made her in 3rd grade. She lived in the house Daniel built with his own hands, surrounded by memories, waiting for the day they'd come back, not for money, but for her. Now sitting in that same living room decades later, phone still warm in her hand, she realized something painful and true. They never saw her. Not really. They saw a safety net, a backup plan, a vault with a heartbeat. And maybe, just maybe, it was time they saw what that vault had cost to build. Jason's driveway gleamed under the California sun like a runway for luxury. His black BMW X7, leased, not bought, sat parked beside his wife's Tesla, both freshly detailed, both bearing license plates that read cash flow and blessed. Inside the house, marble floors echoed with the sound of Alexa adjusting the thermostat, while a robotic vacuum hummed beneath a $12,000 sectional sofa. He scrolled through his phone, sipping cold brew from a crystal tumbler, when Chloe's name popped up on FaceTime. "Did you talk to Mom yet?" she asked before he could say hello. Her background was a Miami penthouse balcony, palm trees swaying, ocean glittering. She wore oversized sunglasses and a silk robe that probably cost more than Evelyn's monthly utilities. "Yeah," Jason said, leaning back. She didn't argue, just went quiet. Classic Mom. "She always does that," Chloe scoffed, lighting a cigarette, despite the smoke-free home sign taped to her sliding glass door. Passive-aggressive silence, but whatever, as long as she signs the papers. Marcus joined the call a second later, his face filling the screen from a dimly lit garage. Oil stains on his shirt, but a brand new Rolex glinted on his wrist. "Yo, you guys get your boxes yet?" "Boxes?" Jason frowned. "Mom said she's giving us our inheritance early, but in symbolic form, whatever that means." Marcus rolled his eyes. "Probably some weird craft project. Remember that ugly quilt she made us in 2009? I used it to cover my lawnmower." Chloe laughed.
God, yes, she really thought we'd hang that thing in the living room. Anyway, I don't care what it is, as long as the deed to the lake house is in mine. I told Brad I'd host his firm's retreat there this summer. You told him what? Jason snapped. That place is mine. I've been paying the property taxes for 3 years. Because Mom asked you to, not because you own it, Chloe shot back. Marcus leaned closer to the camera, grease smudged on his cheek. Look, I just want the cash. I'm about to close on a vintage Camaro. If she's holding out on me, I swear... The call cut off as Jason muted it, rubbing his temples. He glanced at the framed photo on his desk, his high school graduation, Evelyn standing beside him in a thrift store dress, smiling like she hadn't eaten in 2 days. He remembered how she'd sold her blood plasma that week to afford the frame. But that was then.
Now he had investors to impress, a private school tuition bill due next week, and a lifestyle to maintain. He couldn't afford nostalgia. Downstairs, his daughter asked why Grandma never came to her ballet recital. "She's busy, sweetie," he said without looking up. "Old people like being alone." In Miami, Chloe ended the call and tossed her phone onto a velvet chaise. She opened her banking app, checked her balance, $4,283, and sighed. The credit card company had declined her last purchase at Saks. Again, she needed that money, needed it yesterday. And in Ohio, Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, stared at the peeling paint on his garage wall, and whispered to no one, "Just give us the damn money, Mom. Stop playing games." None of them noticed the date on their phones. It was the anniversary of Daniel's death, and Evelyn had spent it alone, eating soup from a can, staring at the empty chairs around her kitchen table, the same chairs they'd once filled with laughter, now echoing only with absence. But soon, very soon, they'd remember every chair had a story, and every story had a price. The notice came on a Tuesday. Evelyn found it tucked under her front door, a bright yellow slip from the utility company. Final disconnection warning. Service will be terminated in 7 days due to non-payment. She held it in her trembling hands, the paper thin as a promise broken. The bill was for $842. Not much by most standards, but to her it might as well have been $1 million. Her pension barely covered groceries. Social Security checks arrived like clockwork, but after medication, insurance, and the slow bleed of inflation, there was little left. The roof had leaked all winter. She'd stuffed towels in the attic corners, placed buckets beneath the worst strips, and prayed for dry skies. Now spring rains were coming again. She needed help. Not charity, just help. So she did something she hadn't done in years. She called her children. First, Jason. His voicemail picked up after 2 rings. She left a message, voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. The electric bill's a bit high this month, and I was wondering if you might be able to lend a hand, even just a little. I'll pay you back when my next check comes. No rush. Just call me back." She waited. All day she kept the phone close, watched it like it might sprout wings. At dinner, canned soup and toast, she reheated it twice, hoping the ring would come. It didn't. The next morning she called Chloe. "Mom?" Chloe answered, breathless, as if Evelyn had interrupted something important. "Hold on, I'm at SoulCycle." "Oh, I'm sorry, honey, Can it wait? I've got 10 minutes before my facial." A pause. "Is this about money again?" Evelyn flinched. "Not money, just I need to move. The house is too big now, too expensive. I thought maybe you'd help me sort through things, pack a few boxes. I can't lift the heavy ones anymore." Silence. Then a sigh. Long, theatrical. "Mom, I'm literally in Miami, and even if I weren't, I've got Brad's parents visiting next week, plus the decorators coming to redo the guest suite. I can't just drop everything." "I understand," Evelyn said quickly, too quickly. "Of course. But hey," Chloe added, her tone brightening, "why don't you just sell the house? You're sitting on like $500,000 in equity. Problem solved." "It's not that simple," Evelyn murmured. "There are memories here. Memories don't pay bills, Mom." A beat. "Look, I've got to go. Love you." The line went dead. That afternoon, Evelyn called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, Ma, what's up?" Relief flooded her. "Oh, Marcus, I was hoping you could come by this weekend. I need to downsize, move into that senior apartment complex on Elm, but I can't do it alone. The furniture, the boxes, my back." Marcus whistled. "Man, that sounds rough, but I'm swamped. Got 3 cars in the shop, and one of them's a classic Mustang. Guy's paying triple if I finish by Friday." I know, she said, forcing cheer. "But maybe just for an hour? Just to help me take down the bookshelves?" Another pause, longer this time. Then, gently but firmly, he said, "You know what? Why don't you just hire movers? Use some of that inheritance cash." Evelyn froze. What inheritance cash? "You know, the money Dad left, the savings, all that stuff you've been sitting on." "There is no sitting on, Marcus," she whispered. "There never was." "Well, then sell the house," he said, almost if it were obvious. "Honestly, Ma, it's just wood and nails. You're not going to live forever. Might as well cash out while you can." She didn't respond. After a moment, he added, almost jokingly, "Just leave us the deed when you die. We'll throw you the best funeral money can buy." The words hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn thanked him, said goodbye, hung up. She walked to the window and looked out at the backyard, where Daniel had taught Jason to ride a bike, where Chloe had held her first tea party with stuffed animals, where Marcus had buried his pet turtle in a shoebox coffin. The grass was overgrown, the swing set rusted, but it was still sacred ground. Now her own children saw it as collateral. That night she sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd helped with homework, bandaged scraped knees, and celebrated every small victory, and opened her checkbook. The balance, $63.18. Outside, thunder rolled, and Evelyn Carter made her decision. If they wanted an inheritance, they would get one, but not the kind they expected. The next morning, Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't rage. She didn't call them again. She made her bed with hospital corners, just like she'd done every day since nursing school. She brewed a single cup of tea, using the last bag in the box. Then she walked to the closet and pulled out the old leather satchel Daniel had given her for their 10th anniversary. It smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Inside, beneath yellowed receipts and a faded train ticket from 1982, lay a small black address book. On the first page, in neat cursive, Marjorie Langston, attorney at law. She hadn't dialed that number in over a decade. Now, she did. "Marjorie, it's Evelyn Carter." Her voice was calm, clear, like polished glass. "I need to revise my will, and I need your help with something unconventional." There was a pause on the other end. Then, warmly, "Evelyn, it's been too long. Come by the office this afternoon. We'll talk." By noon, she was dressed in her best blouse, the one with the pearl buttons, and her only pair of low heels. She drove her aging Buick downtown, windows down, spring air brushing her silver hair. For the first time in years, she felt not like a burden, but like a woman with purpose. Marjorie's office was all warm wood and soft light. They hugged like old friends, which they were. They'd met when Evelyn needed legal help after Daniel's death, and Marjorie had guided her through probate, insurance claims, and the brutal arithmetic of sudden widowhood. Over chamomile tea, Marjorie remembered her preference. Evelyn laid it all out. "I've spent 50 years giving," she said, hands folded neatly in her lap. "Now they want the rest before I'm even gone. Alaya salam if love is a bank account they can withdraw from whenever they please." Marjorie listened, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "What do you want to do?" "I want them to see," Evelyn said. "Not just the money they think they're owed, but the cost of it. The sleepless nights, the missed birthdays, the dreams I folded up and tucked away so theirs could fly." Marjorie leaned forward. "You're not just rewriting your will. You're staging a reckoning." "Yes," Evelyn said simply, but not with anger, with truth. They spent the next 3 hours crafting a plan. No cash, no property deeds, no stocks or bonds handed over with a smile. Instead, each child would receive a sealed metal box, custom-made, unbreakable, locked with a combination only Evelyn knew. Inside, artifacts, receipts, letters. Photographs, ledger pages, hospital wristbands, a pawn shop ticket, a child's lost tooth in a tiny envelope. Every item a silent witness to what she'd sacrificed. And the real estate? The modest savings? The life insurance payout? Gone. Redirected. To the Evelyn and Daniel Carter Scholarship for Single Mothers in Nursing, a fund that would bear their names, their legacy, their values. "You're sure about this?" Marjorie asked gently as Evelyn stood to leave. Evelyn looked out the window at the city skyline, then back at her friend. "I raised them to be kind, to be grateful, to understand that love isn't transactional." She smiled, sad but resolute. If they've forgotten, then maybe it's time they remember. That evening, back home, Evelyn lit a candle in the living room. the same one she'd used during power outages when the kids were small. She opened a drawer in her desk and took out 3 blank index cards. On each, she wrote a single sentence. Everything you've ever wanted is inside, but you can't open it until you understand what it truly cost me. She placed them carefully into envelopes labeled with her children's names. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees like whispered secrets. Tomorrow, she would call them. Tomorrow, the lesson would begin. The invitation arrived on a Thursday, delivered not by email or text, but by certified mail. Thick ivory envelopes embossed with the seal of Langston and Price, attorneys at law. Inside, crisp black lettering on heavy paper. You are cordially requested to attend the formal reading of the last will and testament of Evelyn Carter. Date, Saturday, 10 a.m. Location, Langston and Price Conference Room, 427 Oak Ridge Avenue. No RSVP required, no explanation given. Jason opened his in the driveway, still wearing his gym clothes. He smirked. Finally, she caved. Chloe received hers while getting her nails done. She snapped a photo for Instagram, adulting level inheritance unlocked, and captioned it with a laughing emoji. Marcus found his tucked under the windshield wiper of his Camaro. He read it twice, then grinned. About damn time. None of them questioned why their mother would hold a will reading while still alive. None wondered why an attorney's office was involved instead of a family dinner. They saw only what they wanted to see, the end of waiting, the beginning of receiving. Saturday morning, they arrived separately. Jason in his BMW, Chloe in a rented Uber Black, Marcus on his motorcycle, helmet tucked under his arm. They exchanged stiff nods in the lobby, dressed in what they thought passed for respectable. Jason in a blazer he'd worn to a client meeting, Chloe in designer jeans and a silk blouse, Marcus in a clean flannel and boots that cost more than Evelyn's monthly rent. Marjorie greeted them at the conference room door, her expression unreadable. Please come in. Your mother is waiting. Evelyn sat at the head of the long mahogany table, hands folded, back straight. She wore a simple navy dress, her silver hair pinned neatly. She looked older than they remembered, but also stronger, calmer, like a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. You came, she said. Not accusatory, just noting. Of course we did, Mom, Jason said, flashing a practiced smile. We're ready whenever you are. Chloe adjusted her sunglasses, indoors, and crossed her legs. Let's make this quick. I've got a spa appointment at noon. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Yeah, Ma, let's get the show on the road. Evelyn didn't react. She simply nodded to Marjorie.
The attorney stepped forward, placed 3 identical metal boxes on the table, each about the size of a shoebox, matte black, reinforced corners, padlocked with a digital combination lock. They looked industrial, unyielding, nothing like the velvet-lined treasure chests they'd imagined. Jason frowned. What's this? Your inheritance, Evelyn said softly. Silence. Chloe laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. You're joking, right? Where's the deed, the bank info, the keys to the lake house? Evelyn met each of their eyes in turn. This is your inheritance. Everything you've ever wanted is inside. Marcus stepped forward, voice low. Open it. I can't, she said. Not yet. What do you mean you can't? Jason's voice rose. You called us here. You said you were giving it to us. I am, Evelyn said. Calm Elias Stillwater. But there's a condition. She slid an envelope toward each of them. Inside, the same handwritten note. Everything you've ever wanted is inside, but you can't open it until you understand what it truly cost me. Chloe scoffed. What is this, some kind of riddle? A guilt trip? No, Evelyn said, her voice quiet but firm. It's a mirror. Marjorie added, the locks are coded to your mother's biometrics. Only she can open them, and she's chosen not to until you meet the condition. Jason slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. We're your children. You owe us this. For the first time, something flickered in Evelyn's eyes. Not anger, but sorrow so deep it looked like stone. I owed you love, she said, and I gave it, every day, without asking for anything in return. She stood slowly, deliberately. Wait, Marcus called out. How do we understand? What does that even mean? Evelyn paused at the door, looked back. Start by remembering who I am, not what I have. Then she walked out, leaving them alone with 3 locked boxes, and the first real silence they'd felt in years. The boxes sat on the table like silent sentinels, cold, unyielding, indifferent to the storm of confusion and frustration swirling around them. Jason was the first to move. He grabbed his box, hefted it in both hands. It was heavier than he expected, solid, real. He ran his fingers over the smooth metal surface, searching for seams, hinges, anything. Nothing, just seamless steel and a digital lock with 4 blank digits glowing faintly red. "What the hell is in this thing?" he muttered. Chloe snatched hers up, shook it. No sound. "It's empty. She's playing us." Marcus didn't touch his. He just stared at it, jaw tight. Something about the weight of it, the finality, unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Marjorie cleared her throat. "Your mother has instructed that you may take the boxes home, but she will not provide the code until each of you fulfills the conditions stated in your letters." "And what if we break them open?" Jason challenged, voice edged with impatience. "You can try," Marjorie said evenly, "but they're made of reinforced titanium alloy, designed to withstand forced entry, and if you damage them, you forfeit whatever is inside, including any legal claim to your mother's estate." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "This is blackmail." "No," Marjorie said gently. "It's accountability." They left the office in silence, each carrying their box like an unwanted child. Outside, the sun was bright, the sky impossibly blue, a cruel contrast to the storm inside them. Jason tossed his into the trunk of his BMW, muttering about emotional manipulation. Chloe slid hers into the back of her Uber, snapping a selfie with the caption, "Mom's midlife crisis just got expensive." Marcus strapped his to the back of his motorcycle with bungee cords, glancing once at the law office window before revving the engine and peeling away. That night, alone in their homes, each one faced the box again. Jason placed his on his marble kitchen island, poured a cass of bourbon, and circled it like a predator. He tried prying at the edges with a butter knife. Nothing. He Googled how to crack a biometric lock. Found nothing useful. Frustrated, he kicked the cabinet and winced when pain shot up his foot. In Miami, Chloe set hers on her designer coffee table, lit a candle, and tried to meditate. But all she could think about was the lake house, the Instagram post she'd planned, the envy of her friends. She picked up the box, held it close, then hurled it against the wall. It didn't dent, didn't even scuff. It just sat there, mocking her. Marcus took his to the garage, set it on his workbench beneath a flickering fluorescent light. He ran a hand over the cool surface. For a moment, he thought of his childhood, of coming home with skinned knees and his mom cleaning them with gentle hands, humming old hymns under her breath. He shook his head, as if to dislodge the memory. "Get it together," he told himself. But later, long after midnight, he found himself sitting on the garage floor, the box in his lap, whispering, "What do you want for me, Ma?" None of them slept well that night, and none of them noticed the small, nearly invisible seam along the bottom edge of the box, where, if pressed just right, a hidden compartment would slide open. Not with force, only with humility. But they weren't ready for that yet, so the boxes remained closed, waiting, watching, remembering everything their owners had forgotten. Jason couldn't take it anymore. 3 days had passed, 3 nights of staring at the box on his kitchen island like it was a ticking bomb. His wife had stopped asking about it. His kids avoided the room. Even the dog gave it a wide berth. On the 4th morning, after another sleepless night and a failed Zoom call with a client who'd called him distracted, Jason snapped. "Fine," he growled, grabbing a crowbar from the garage. "If she wants a game, we'll play." He placed the box on the concrete floor of his driveway, neighbors' curtains twitching in the early light. He wedged the crowbar into the seam, any seam, and pulled with all his strength. Metal groaned, sparks flew. The lock held. Cursing, he slammed the crowbar down again, harder. Once, twice. On the 3rd strike, something gave. Not the lock, but the outer casing. A panel popped loose with a sharp crack. Breathing hard, sweat on his brow, Jason pried it open. Inside, no cash, no deeds, no jewelry. Just a single photograph. Faded, curling at the edges. It showed a young Evelyn, hair dark, eyes tired but smiling,
holding baby Jason in a hospital gown. She looked exhausted, pale but radiant. On the back, in her handwriting, Jason's first day home. I sold my blood plasma that morning to buy his crib, worth every drop. Beneath the photo lay a yellowed receipt. St. Mary's Plasma Center, $45, March 12, 1983. Jason stared at it. His throat tightened. He remembered that crib, the one with the chipped paint and squeaky wheel. He'd slept in it until he was 6. He'd never known. He sank to his knees on the driveway. In Miami, Chloe had taken a different approach. She'd hired a locksmith. When he couldn't open it, she paid a tech specialist $500 to override the biometric lock. When he failed too, rage took over. She dragged the box to her balcony, raised it above her head, and hurled it onto the pool deck below. It didn't break, but the impact jarred something loose inside. Curious despite herself, she knelt and pried at the loosened panel with her manicured nails. It slid open. Inside, a tiny satin pouch. She opened it. A single baby tooth, small, milky white, tied with a blue ribbon, and a note. Joey lost this tooth the night you got chickenpox. I stayed up all night cooling your fever, rocking you, whispering stories so you wouldn't cry. You asked if the tooth fairy would come. I said yes.
I left this quarter under your pillow and cried because I couldn't afford more. Beneath it, a crumpled school invoice. Field trip fee, $35, unpaid. Chloe's hands trembled. She remembered that trip. She'd been the only kid whose parent didn't pay. She'd sat in the library while her class went to the aquarium. She told everyone her mom was too busy. Now she knew why. In Ohio, Marcus hadn't tried to break his box. Not yet. But that night, drunk on cheap whiskey and guilt, he ran his thumb over the cold metal and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ma." Alayhi salam, if in response, the box emitted a soft click. He froze. The hidden compartment, unseen by his siblings, slid open with a sigh. Inside, a pawnshop ticket dated 1997, and a photo of Evelyn wearing her wedding ring, the same one Daniel slipped on her finger beneath the summer sky. On the back, sold this to pay for Marcus's inhaler when insurance denied the claim. Still worth it. Marcus stared at the ticket, then at his own reflection in the garage window, beard unshaven, eyes hollow, Rolex gleaming on a wrist that had never once offered to help carry her groceries. He didn't smash the box. He hugged it. And for the first time in years, Marcus Carter wept. Not for what he'd lost, but for what he'd never truly seen. The boxes didn't just hold objects, they held echoes. After the initial shock, the siblings couldn't stop returning to them, not to break them open further, but to look, to touch, to remember. Jason found more inside his box than he'd first seen. Beneath the photo and receipt was a small spiral notebook, its pages thin, ink faded. He opened it with trembling fingers. It was a ledger, not of debts owed, but of love given. March 14th, 1985, Jason's science fair. Bought poster board, glue, batteries for Volcano, $12.75. He won second place, so proud. June 3rd, 1991, new sneakers for tryouts, $48, on sale. He made the team. August 17th, 1999, tuition deposit, used tax return plus overtime. Don't tell him I skipped meals this month. Page after page, year after year, every sacrifice documented, not for repayment, but alayhi salam proof that she'd been there, always. He flipped to the last entry, dated just 2 years ago, April 10th, 2024. Jason called, said he might need a loan for car payment, gave him $600 from emergency fund, didn't ask when he'd pay back, just glad I could help. He never paid her back. He never even thanked her. In Miami, Chloe discovered a folded piece of construction paper tucked beneath the satin pouch. It was a Mother's Day card she'd made in 2nd grade. Crayon hearts, misspelled words. "I love you, Mom, because you make me feel safe." Inside, a pressed daisy. And beneath it, a hospital bill. Emergency room, Evelyn Carter. Diagnosis, severe dehydration, malnutrition. Discharged same day. Date, May 12th, 2003. Mother's Day. Chloe remembered that day. She'd been at a sleepover, complaining about how her mom never buys cool stuff like other moms.
She hadn't known Evelyn had collapsed in the grocery store after using her last $20 to buy Chloe's favorite ice cream for the party. Now, staring at the bill, $1,842, unpaid, eventually written off, Chloe sank to the floor, the card clutched to her chest, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. Marcus, meanwhile, found a cassette tape in his box. No label, just a date, October 1995. He hadn't owned a tape player in decades, but he drove to a vintage electronics store, bought one for $80, and played it that night in his garage. Her voice filled the space, soft, tired, singing an old lullaby he hadn't heard since he was 5. Halfway through, she coughed, then whispered, "Sorry, baby, Mama's just tired, but I'll keep singing till you sleep." He rewound it.
Played it again, and again, until dawn broke and his eyes were raw. But the most haunting discovery came when they each found the same item, hidden in separate compartments, placed with deliberate care. A single key, rusted, small, unmarked, and a note. "This opens the drawer in my nightstand. Everything you need to know is there." They didn't call each other, not yet, but all three, in their separate cities, looked at that key and felt the weight of a lifetime of absence pressing down on them. Because now they understood. The box wasn't the inheritance, it was the invitation. And the real lesson hadn't even begun. They didn't go to her house right away. Pride is a stubborn thing, even when it's crumbling. Jason told himself he'd wait until the weekend. Chloe said she needed to process. Marcus claimed he had a big job coming in. But the truth was simpler. They were afraid. Afraid of what they'd find in that nightstand drawer. Afraid of what they'd see in her eyes. Afraid that the woman they'd reduced to a bank account might still love them, even after everything. But the key burned in their pockets like a live coal. 3 days later, Jason caved first. He drove through the night, arriving at Evelyn's house just before dawn. The porch light was on, just like it always was when he came home late as a teenager. He stood on the steps, key in hand, heart hammering. He almost turned back. Then he saw her silhouette in the window. She was watching him. Not with anger, not with disappointment, just waiting. He stepped inside. The house smelled of lavender and old books. Everything was exactly as he remembered, and yet utterly changed. Smaller, quieter, full of ghosts he'd ignored for years. "Mom," he whispered. She nodded toward the bedroom, the drawer. He walked down the hall, each step heavier than the last. In her room, the nightstand stood beside her narrow bed, its wood worn smooth by decades of hands reaching for water, medicine, or a photo in the dark. He inserted the key. It turned with a soft click. Inside, 3 envelopes, labeled with their names. Beneath them, a stack of handwritten letters, dozens of them, all unmailed. "Dear Jason, today you called me embarrassing in front of your friends because I wore my old coat. I wanted to cry, but I smiled instead, because your happiness mattered more than my pride. Dear Chloe, I saw your post about toxic parents. I hope you weren't talking about me. I've tried so hard to be enough. Dear Marcus, I heard you tell your friend I don't do anything. I just wanted you to know I still tuck your old blanket into the closet every spring, just in case you ever come home." Jason sank to his knees, tears blurring the ink. He never knew she wrote these, never knew she kept them. He grabbed his envelope and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a USB drive. The note read, "Watch it, then ask yourself, who really abandoned whom?" That afternoon, Chloe arrived. She didn't knock. Just walked in, eyes red-rimmed, hair messy, no makeup. She found Jason sitting on the living room floor, staring at the blank TV screen, the USB drive in his palm. "She's in the garden," he said quietly. Chloe went to the bedroom, opened the drawer, took her envelope. Marcus showed up at dusk, boots muddy, hands shaking. He didn't speak, just nodded at his siblings, went straight to the nightstand. One by one, they plugged the USB drives into Evelyn's old laptop. The video began. Grainy footage, home movies, security cam clips, voice memos. Evelyn, alone on Christmas morning, setting 3 extra plates, just in case. Evelyn walking 2 miles in the rain to return a library book because she couldn't afford the late fee. Evelyn whispering into a recorder. Today, Jason said, "You're not like other moms." I wonder if he knows other moms don't work nights so their kids can have piano lessons. Then, the final clip. Shot last week. Evelyn sitting in this very living room, facing the camera. "I'm not giving you money," she said, voice steady, "because money won't teach you what you need to learn. But maybe this will." She held up a photo, the 3 of them, arms around her, grinning on a beach. "You were my greatest joy," she said softly, "and my greatest sorrow is that you forgot how to see me." The screen went black. Silence filled the house. No one spoke. No one moved. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. And for the first time in years, all 3 children sat together, in the home they'd abandoned. Not heirs, but people, finally ready to face the truth.
The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Evelyn's voice came from the doorway, soft but clear. "I didn't call you here to punish you," she said, leaning against the doorframe, her hands folded in front of her. "I called you here because I still love you, even when you forgot how to love me back." Jason stood first. His face was wet, his shoulders slumped like a man who'd just lost something he never realized he had. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Chloe hugged her knees to her chest, eyes fixed on the floor. "All those years, I thought you were just fine, that you didn't need anything, that you wanted to be alone."
"What about us, Ma? Do we get nothing?" Evelyn walked to him, placed a hand on his shoulder, the same hand that once bandaged his skinned knees, packed his lunches, stayed up nights praying over his fevered brow. "You get the truth," she said, "and if you choose to learn from it, you get a second chance." She turned to them all. "The house stays in the family name, but only if one of you moves in and cares for it. Not Elias as an asset, Elias a home. The savings are gone. The inheritance you demanded, it was never mine to give freely, not when it came at the cost of my dignity." She paused, her voice softening. "But my love, that was always yours, even when you didn't deserve it, even when you forgot to ask for it." She walked to the window, gazing out at the backyard where they'd once played. "I'm not punishing you," she repeated. "I'm freeing you from the lie that love is a transaction, and maybe freeing myself too." No one spoke, but something shifted in the room. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first fragile crack in the wall they'd built between them. And through that crack, light began to seep in.
The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. Jason stayed. He slept on the couch, folding his designer shirts carefully over the armrest like they were relics from another life. He washed dishes without being asked, fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen. One morning he found Evelyn struggling to lift a bag of dog food for Mrs. Henderson next door. He carried it for her, then came back and mowed her lawn too. Chloe didn't leave either. She sat at the kitchen table for hours, flipping through old photo albums she'd never bothered to look at before. She found pictures of herself as a child, asleep in Evelyn's arms, wrapped in a blanket Evelyn had crocheted during night shifts. On the back of one, in faded ink, Chloe's first fever, held her all night, would do it 1,000 times again. She cried so hard she couldn't breathe. Marcus lingered in the garage, tinkering with nothing. But one afternoon he disappeared into town and returned with paint, brushes, and wood filler. Without a word, he started repairing the porch steps, the ones that had been rotting for years. When Evelyn brought him lemonade, he didn't look up, but his voice was thick when he said,
Sorry, I never noticed they were broken. That night, over a simple dinner of soup and bread, Evelyn's favorite, they sat together at the table for the first time in over a decade. No one mentioned money. No one talked about the boxes or the will. But Jason finally asked, "Why didn't you ever tell us how hard it was?" Evelyn stirred her soup slowly. "Because love doesn't keep score, sweetheart. And I thought, if I just gave enough, you'd feel it, even if you didn't say it back." Chloe reached across the table, her hand trembling, and covered Evelyn's. "I thought you were strong because you never needed anything. I didn't realize you were strong because you gave everything anyway." Marcus cleared his throat. "I used to brag that my mom never asked for help, like it was a flex." He looked down. "I didn't know I was describing someone who felt like she couldn't." Evelyn's eyes filled, but she smiled. "You were kids. Then you became adults with your own battles. I didn't want to be another weight on your shoulders." "But you weren't a weight," Jason said, voice breaking. "You were our foundation. And we treated you like the floor, something to walk on without looking down." Outside, the wind rustled the trees. A bird called in the distance.
For the first time, they saw Allahu alayhi wasallam her, not alayhi salam a source of comfort or cash, but alayhi salam a woman who had loved them through silence, scarcity, and solitude. And in that seeing, regret bloomed, not alayhi salam, but alayhi salam's sorrow, so deep it could only be healed by change. Later that night, Chloe found Evelyn on the back porch, wrapped in a shawl, staring at the stars. "And sorry I made you feel invisible," she whispered. Evelyn took her hand. "You didn't make me invisible, honey. You just forgot to look." Inside, Marcus stood in the hallway, holding the metal box. He opened it again, not to search for more items, but to place something inside, a note he'd written. "I see you now, Ma, and I won't look away again." Upstairs, Jason tucked the unmailed letters back into the nightstand drawer, but left one out, the one where Evelyn wrote, "Today I wish just once someone would ask if I was okay." He folded it carefully, put it in his pocket. And the next morning, over coffee, he did what no one had done in years. He looked his mother in the eyes and said, "Are you okay, Mom?" She didn't answer right away. But when she did, her voice was soft with something new. "Now, I am."
Weeks passed, and the house began to breathe again. Jason didn't return to California. He called his wife, told her he needed time, real time, and moved into the guest room upstairs. He started helping Evelyn with groceries, driving her to doctor's appointments, even sitting with her during her evening tea. One afternoon, he found her struggling to replace a light bulb in the hallway. Without a word, he took the ladder from her hands and did it himself. She watched him, silent, but her eyes shimmered. Chloe canceled her Miami lease. She stayed in the sunroom, painting watercolors of the garden, something she'd loved as a child but abandoned when real life demanded practicality. One day, she brought Evelyn a small canvas, a portrait of her younger self, holding baby Marcus, sunlight in her hair. On the back, she wrote, "This is who I forgot. This is who I want to remember." Evelyn hung it above her bed. Marcus didn't go back to the garage, not right away. Instead, he started fixing things around the house, the squeaky hinge on the pantry door, the broken shutter on the east window, the loose step on the back porch. He worked quietly, methodically, as if each repair was an apology. One evening, he sat with Evelyn on the porch swing, the same one Daniel had built, and asked, "Did Dad ever say thank you enough?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "He showed me, every day." Marcus nodded. Then, after a long silence, "I'm learning how to show it too." They began eating dinner together every night. No phones, no distractions, just conversation, awkward at first, then easier, like muscles remembering how to move. They talked about nothing important, the weather, old TV shows, the neighbor's new puppy. But beneath the surface, something deeper was mending. One Sunday, Jason drove Evelyn to the cemetery. They stood at Daniel's grave, side by side. Jason placed a single white rose on the stone, his father's favorite. "I never thanked you," he said quietly, "for keeping him alive in our stories." Evelyn touched his arm. "You are thanking me now." Chloe started cooking again, real meals, not takeout. She made her mother's old meatloaf recipe, the one with the secret dash of oyster sauce. When Evelyn tasted it, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Just like your grandmother used to make." Chloe cried into her apron.
Marcus enrolled in a community college course, family communication. He didn't tell anyone at first.
But one night, he left the textbook open on the kitchen table. Evelyn saw it, said nothing, but the next morning, she left a note on his plate. "Proud of you." They didn't talk about the inheritance anymore. It had become irrelevant, because they were finally receiving something far more valuable: presents. And Evelyn, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a ghost in her own home. She felt seen, not for what she could give, but for who she had always been.
Spring deepened into summer, and Evelyn's house no longer felt like a museum of memories. It felt alive again. She moved into the smaller apartment on Elm Street just as Eliza planned, but not alone. Jason helped her pack, carefully wrapping each dish, each photo frame, each fragile keepsake. Chloe painted the new living room a soft sage green, Evelyn's favorite color, and hung string lights above the window so it would feel like magic at night. Marcus installed grab bars in the bathroom, a ramp by the front step, and a smart thermostat he programmed to keep her warm without her lifting a finger. The senior community welcomed her with open arms, but Evelyn didn't retreat into solitude. She joined the garden club, taught knitting to a group of widows, and even started a weekly storytelling hour where she shared tales of her nursing days, stories full of grit, grace, and quiet heroism. Her children visited often, not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. Jason brought his kids every other weekend. They called her Nana, and she taught them how to make pancakes from scratch, just like she'd done for him. One evening, his daughter asked why Nana's hands were so wrinkled. Evelyn smiled and said, "Because they've held a lot of love, and love leaves marks." Chloe began volunteering at the local women's shelter, inspired by the scholarship fund bearing her parents' names. She organized donation drives, mentored young mothers, and even started a blog about redefining legacy, not through wealth, but through care. Her first post went viral. "My mother gave me everything. I spent years thinking it wasn't enough. Now I know it was more than I deserved." Marcus opened a small auto repair workshop near Evelyn's apartment, Carter & Sons Honest Repairs. He put her photo on the wall behind the counter, beside Daniel's old toolbox. When customers asked who she was, he'd say, "That's my mom. She taught me that fixing things starts with showing up." Evelyn still lived simply. She clipped coupons, drank tea from chipped mugs, and wore the same cardigan 3 days a week. But now her eyes sparkled with peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of belonging. One evening, as fireflies blinked in the courtyard, she sat on a bench with her children around her. No boxes, no wills, no demands, just silence filled with understanding. "I used to think love meant giving until I had nothing left.
Now I know love means giving, but never losing yourself in the process." Jason squeezed her hand. "And we used to think love meant getting what we wanted. Now we know it means seeing the person in front of you." Chloe leaned her head on Evelyn's shoulder. "I'm sorry it took us so long." Evelyn kissed her hair. "Love doesn't run on clocks, sweetheart. It runs on second chances." And as the sun dipped below trees, casting golden light over their faces, Evelyn Carter, nurse, widow, mother, teacher, finally rested. Not because she had been repaid, but because she had been remembered.
The scholarship fund launched on a crisp autumn morning. A small ceremony was held at the community college nursing school. A bronze plaque was unveiled in the lobby, the Evelyn and Daniel Carter Scholarship for Single Mothers, because every sacrifice deserves to be seen. Evelyn stood beside it, dressed in a simple navy dress, her silver hair catching the light. Her children flanked her, Jason in a modest blazer, Chloe in a hand-knit sweater she'd made herself, Marcus clean-shaven, wearing a button-down shirt with no logo, no flash. A young woman stepped forward to accept the first award. She was 24, with tired eyes and a toddler clinging to her leg. "I'm going to be a nurse," she said, voice trembling. "Like you." Evelyn took her hand. "You already are." Afterward, they walked together through the campus gardens. No cameras, no speeches. Just 4 people who had once been strangers under the same roof, now bound not by blood alone, but by humility, repair, and grace. That evening, back at Evelyn's apartment, they gathered around her small dining table, now expanded with borrowed chairs to fit them all. Candles flickered, soup simmered on the stove. Laughter, real and unguarded, filled the room. Later, as Jason helped Evelyn wash dishes, he asked quietly, "Do you think we'll ever deserve what you gave us?"
She dried a plate, handed it to him. You don't have to deserve love, Jason. You just have to receive it and pass it on. Upstairs, Chloe tucked a new photo in the frame on Evelyn's nightstand, the 5 of them, taken that afternoon, smiling without posing, arms around each other like they belonged. Marcus sat on the porch, watching the stars. In his pocket, he still carried the metal box, but now it held something new. A note from Evelyn, written that morning. You came back. That's all I ever wanted. As midnight approached, Evelyn stood at her window, looking out at the quiet street. The world was full of noise, of people chasing money, status, validation. But here, in this small apartment, there was something rarer, peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because they had finally chosen to see each other. The next morning, a video appeared online, anonymous at first, then shared by a local news page, then picked up by national outlets. It showed clips, Evelyn working night shifts, packing lunches, sitting alone on holidays. Then her children returning, repairing, listening. No narration, just music.
And at the end, white text on a black screen. Inheritance isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build while you're still here. And the greatest legacy isn't wealth. It's being remembered with love. Within days, it had millions of views. Comments flooded in. Called my mom after watching this. I'm going home this weekend. We forgot to see the people who built our lives. Evelyn never watched it. She didn't need to. Because every morning now, her phone rang. Not with demands, but with voices saying, "Good morning, Mom." Every evening, someone knocked on her door. Not for money, but with soup, or a book, or just time. And in the quiet moments, when she sat with her tea and looked at the photos on her wall, she knew. She hadn't just given them a lesson, she'd given them back to themselves. And in doing so, she'd finally come home too.